Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Unown Draft League podcast. Today, we finally have the match reviews for Week 6. This is Limevolt, and I'm joined by Smeargle. Smeargle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty well tonight. How are you doing today, Limevolt?
Hey, I've been doing great lately. But as for the matches themselves, it's super cool what we really got to see this week. I mean, by this point, we are quite deep into the main season, right? We're on Week 6 out of 8, so people are really starting to have to fight for those top spots, right? Only so many people are going to be able to make playoffs. And at this point, the numbers are starting to become a lot more real. And with so many people having that playoff spot still within reach, I mean, they're all playing their hardest.
Absolutely. Looking at the standings, we have a ton of people at 4-2, a couple at 5-1, and a couple above and below that. But it's
Mhm.
looking pretty solid for a top list. And I think going into the next few weeks, I think we definitely have a couple people pretty much signing their spots as long as they don't lose it in the coming weeks. But
Mhm.
for now, we
Yeah,
have.
if I'm not mistaken, there's only one person who is like outright hard confirmed to like be pretty much guaranteed playoffs. Everyone else that's currently in like a top spot is very likely, but nothing is impossible.
Nope, you could just tank your next 2 weeks, and that's that.
Mhm.
We hope to not see that happen, however.
But I mean, on the
So,
other end, people who may not have the best record as of right now, they could just go on an insane hot streak and just shoot themselves right up to the top.
yep, it is to note that one of the tiebreakers is resistance. So, beating stronger players will help you in the long run. So, go for the win.
Mm. But
For
yeah, I
now,
mean, with all that said, I see no reason to continue stalling. I say we just get right into the matches. What do you say?
absolutely. We have our first submitted match, the Frostpunk Frostmoss versus the Forsaken City Frogadiers, coached by Trico and Hazel, respectively, with Hazel bringing the Greninja Alolan Muck, Klefki, Toadscroll, Chiyu, and Hisuian Growlithe.
Yeah, something we haven't seen yet. Another baby Hisuian Pokemon from the Forsaken City Frogadiers, and what a bring, you know?
You, usually we see the Hisuian Zorua, but
Mhm.
let's
But
see.
but I mean, hey, we got the Cub trying to take on the Big Mama. On the other end, with the Forsaken, not with the Forsaken, sorry, with the Frostpunk Frostmoss, we have Persian, the fully grown Alolan, not Alolan, God, Hisuian Arcanine, alongside the Hisuian Electrode, Gudra, regular Gudra, not Hisuian, Florges, and Alolan Muck. So we got an interesting matchup here. We got a lot of similar Pokemon, both in terms of the roles they play and just the evolutionary lines they're a part of.
Yep, actually just did not notice that um, Growlithe and Arcanine are in a matchup right now.
And then you also have the Mucks sitting next to them. Is fun.
Oh, this is great. A great mix of Hisuian and Alolan Pokemon with Pokemon that you would see day to day without traveling to Hawaii or to the past.
hmm
But getting
Regardless,
into this,
yeah, getting right into the game.
we see a, a lot of paralysis right away.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, Hazel's able to get up and early reflect, but Trico really doesn't let her do much beyond that, right? Like, just taking an immediate KO thanks to a couple Thunderbolts, fully parrying the Klefki for several turns. I mean, Hazel tries to fire back by Thunder Waving the Persian, but Limber activates. Like, that just. Paralysis absolutely dominated this first match. It was flying everywhere.
Yep, the Gudra as well was Terra Water, which was a
Yes.
very good call into Pokemon like the Chi-Yu. The
hmm
Toedscruel did show up. I don't think we've seen Toedscruel from Hazel before, and if we have, it didn't make a good showing, but it
Right,
did
right. It has not
some
been the
late game
most
work.
notable. hmm
Um, we do see that the Klefki, I will say across all of the games actually, the Klefki gets pretty hard targeted by a Thunder Wave.
Right, just making sure that that thing is always going to have a chance to not move because it's such a powerful disruptive Pokemon that being able to sort of hinder its disruption is always just really nice.
Yep, but getting
But I mean,
the
even then, like just in general, the Klefki wasn't able to do much. Like you said, game one, it got taunted pretty quickly. It got thunder waved, um, and Trico themselves were really anticipating a lot of paralysis coming from Tailwind's, from Hazel's side. I mean, you have the Limber Persian, but then you also have Hisuian Arcanine who had a Lumberry to help cure paralysis, which ended up being really impactful.
yep, we do see the Thunder Wave, but also the Spore coming from the Toedscruel, which
Hmm.
does come into play, I believe, but it was a really well thought out plan. The Terra Water, of course, on the Gudra deals with Chi Yu getting a very
Hmm.
swift lead. The Muck tanks a Draco Meteor pretty cleanly. I think it takes 60%. And then,
Yeah, Hazel's Alolan Muck puts in a ton of work.
yep, and it
Unfortunately,
brings Drain Punch, which brings the Persian down to 0 and takes a
mhm.
bunch back. But then we just see a crit onto it, and Muck just the Rain of Violence just does not get to go off.
Yeah,
And
I mean, looking at Trico's team, like the Alolan Muck puts in a ton of work, right? Like it hits several of the Pokemon super effectively. Dren Punch is great coverage, and just in general, Trico didn't have a great way to try and break it. So the Hisui and Arcanine getting that crit on the the Flare Blitz into the Alolan Muck, which mind you was putting in a ton of work. I mean, it's possible Hazel would have outright won the game had that not happened.
we do see in the end game that Hazel is notably upset about that crit, saying she's never been more mad about one. But we do see
I
that
don't blame her. Yeah,
the finale is just pretty much Gudra versus Klefki. We do see Terra Proc from Klefki being the Terra Fairy. Unfortunately, the Gudra just does more damage with Terra Blast than Klefki can do with its now boosted Dazzling Gleams.
yeah. I mean, the game ended, like you said, in a stall war because both Pokemon were paired, mind you. So if the
Yep.
luck had swung in Hazel's side a bit more, it's very possible that she could have won that end game regardless of the disadvantage she was in. But overall, it didn't quite favor her, and obviously very solid prep and play from Trico all around did net them the first game.
The second
Now,
game, we
yeah,
see another Thunder Wave immediately go off onto the Klefki.
hmm
Um, but Hazel takes a somewhat convincing lead, like right away, and
oh,
the
absolutely, yeah,
Trico, of course, tries to fight back, but a lot of turns do go to Hazel, and the Chi Yu is the one that procs Terra, being Terra Water, which by that point in the game, I believe nothing could really handle it. It just pretty much cleaned the game in so many turns.
right. I mean, yeah, like you said, she was able to get off to a really early lead. She immediately got up screen. She was putting stuff to sleep with Toedscruel, and notably, Toedscruel was putting in like I said, it put in a good bit of work. It only took 59% from an ice punch, which, mind you, 59%, that usually sounds like a lot from most cases.
It's
This is a
quad
Pokemon 4 times
effective.
weak to ice. Yeah. Granted, that was because of the reflect that was set, but even so, it's still really impressive to see. And yeah, both sides they tried to pivot around, but as you mentioned, Chi just completely stopped Trico in his tracks.
Yep.
And after that, the Alolan Muck and Chi were able to just completely clean up.
Yeah, this set pretty clearly shows why Klefki gets used. Screens are
Yes.
really good.
I mean, they're so good that I've had several weeks where I didn't bring screens on Klefki just because I anticipated my opponents bringing Brick Break, just because of how effective screens are.
Brick Break,
Like the
Psychic
fact that there
Fangs.
are Yeah, there are two different moves specifically designed to break screens, and yet they're still so strong.
You have to come into the game knowing screens are going off, so how do I play around that? Or how do I break screens? And Trico's team doesn't,
Exactly.
unless the Muck learns Brick Break, I don't
It's
think,
possible. Yeah, I mean, it learns Drain Punch. It probably learns Brick Break. I don't recall off the top of my head though.
I don't know. I've always just used Drain Punch. But I don't know if it learns Brick Break. And it might have actually. We don't really see it coming out from the Trico, but
Yeah.
the screens were just so powerful. and that coupled with the Terra Water from the Chiyu, that game was pretty just cleanly sealed up by Hazel, bringing us
Hmm.
to a game three.
Yeah, and I mean, game three, like right away, we saw a turns one and two that looked near identical to game one, right? Like paralyses were flying around, Reflect gets set up. Just like in general, it looks like it's going to be favoring Trico. However, Alolan Muck gets brought out on Hazel's side, and it just goes to town. It KOs the Persian, and after that, the Hisuian Electrode tries to go boom, but does less than 25% total across both of Hazel's Pokemon, putting her
We
in a definite lead.
we see Trico noting that they seem to have miscalculated with
Yeah, have to
the
assume so.
the Electrode going boom. There are not a lot of Pokemon that can successfully go boom these days.
Yeah, Boom has been heavily shafted as of late.
Yeah, especially into a team running Reflect.
Hmm.
Maybe if it could still have defense, but it can't.
Maybe, but
Through
yeah.
screens, you, that self-destruct, it's not even stab. It's not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
as was said, the Alolan Muck just does so much. Like even Trico afterwards admits that they didn't really have a lot of answers to it on their team. 'Cause, I mean, like in game three, right? Like after that boom, it lives a double up, it crits the Goodra for an Oko, and afterwards, just like Hazel plays a really solid, good end game to make sure that no bad luck can cause her to lose. It was just a very solid win for the Forsaken City Frogadiers.
yep, very solid. And congrats to Hazel for a
Hmm.
2-1.
Yep,
And
her
yeah,
reward facing another Urshifu next week. It's her favorite.
yeah, let's see if she brings it.
It's her favorite. Let's not spoil it too much. Regardless, going into the next match, we do have the Tartarus Tandemaus, coached by Unova, versus the Dancing Dragonites, coached by Tenacity. The Tartarus Tandemaus, of course, having Garchomp, Sylveon, Talonflame, Galarian Articuno, Pachirisu, and
And
the
no
Deer,
sixth Pokemon.
Stantler. Yeah, I wish there was none. Regardless of that, though,
With T bringing Glastrier, Bronzong, Gothorita, Gastrodon, Fluttermane, and Hariyama. I
hmm
think this is one of the first times we've seen the Glastrier, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah, it hasn't made a lot of showings as of late.
it might have popped up early in the league, but we just have
Potentially, yeah.
not seen it. And it does make a
Hmm.
pretty good start. Right away, we see a pretty good play from with the Flare Blitz into the Bronzong. However,
Hmm.
it's and the Terra Fire coming out from Garchomp as well to live in case the Glastrier that was led goes for enemy Icicle Crash. But the Bronzong lives the Flare Blitz, gets the Trick Room off, and Glastrier goes for an Iron Defense. And
Yeah,
with the
it's a
Garchomp,
super aggressive play from T. And I mean, like, yeah, as you mentioned, Garchomp was able to tear it out of its ice weakness, but the
unfortunately,
gods just loved T in this first game.
Glastrier was also running Stomping Tantrum.
Hmm. But yeah, like
Um,
after the Trick Room and Iron Defense goes up, right? Like Icicle Crash comes down, Garchomp gets flinched, Sylveon hard switches in and gets crit.
Crit.
Afterwards,
Hey,
T picks
Lime,
up two. Yeah,
you
yeah.
want to tell me what item the Gastrodon was running?
What item was the Gastrodon running?
It seemed to have done a lot of damage, even with that crit. I think it was a Life Orb Gastrodon.
I mean, offensive Gastrodon isn't the weirdest thing ever. I
My
mean, I recall soft sand Gastrodon being a thing for a while, but yeah, offensive is not a very standard set.
Mind everyone, this is a Hydro Pumping Gastrodon, which I don't know how many other water type moves it learns after losing Scald, but Hydro Pump is definitely a very interesting move for it. And getting the crit, of course, onto Sylveon, doing 80%, that's quite a bit.
Yeah, it was
However,
quite a lot.
Unova tries to play out of it a little bit. The some good protects, some good switches. The Pachirisu unfortunately gets frozen as well off of an
Yeah,
Ice
I
Beam.
mean, This whole game, like, despite Unova being the player with an insane record right now, felt like an underdog story, right? Because like immediately, Tenacity, they get their speed control up, they get a flinch, they get a
For
crit,
for
they
free,
freeze
mind you.
Pachirisu as they pick up they freeze Pachirisu as they pick up two KOs, and Sylveon, left at only 20% health, was able to solo the rest of T's team.
Yep.
It barely lived Gotharita's Psychic at 2%. Like, everything worked against Unova there. Despite that, they were able to do what they needed to preserve their win con. T played well, no issues on that end. He just wasn't able to actually catch Unova, despite everything seeming to go in his favor.
Everything went wrong for However, somehow pulled it back, having
Yeah,
just enough turns,
mhm,
just enough to if that Sylveon had taken any more damage off the Hydro Pump, any more damage off of
mhm.
the Psychic, it's game over. But
Yeah.
with the Throat Spray, it got so much damage off with the Hyper Voices, and it just managed to take the end right then and there.
hmm Yeah, I mean, game two, sorry, game one obviously did go to Unova. It was a genuine nail biter. It's insane that they managed to pull it off, but congrats for managing to do so.
And then game
But
two,
going into game two, I wish they lost game one because of course it was too good to be true. The deer is back.
the
That aside, Unova did make a very good play, having covert cloak Gardecuno to be able to not have to worry about fake out, and being able to just click imprison to prevent Bronzong from setting Trick Room. As well, it was confirmed by Unova after the fact that the Gardecuno was also actually carrying Protect, so that option was just completely stripped from Tenacity. Also, the free nasty plot it got because of the skill swap stuff obviously helped.
Yeah, that turn went entirely wrong for T. Losing
Yeah.
guts off of the skill swap, powering up the Articuno, losing the ability to Trick Room and Protect,
hmm
and then
Yeah.
like and then Hariyama of course just burned itself immediately, and it was
Yeah.
intimidated, mind you. The Sailor has Intimidate before skill swapping, so it
Yeah,
came in
the
intimidated.
following turn, the following turn, the Hariyama tries to Thunder Punch the Galarian Articuno, but it was intimidated, it was burned, and since the
29%.
no, because the deer skill swapped into the Hariyama and it lost guts, the burn was actually hurting it, and the Thunder Punch only did 17%.
Oh, it's 17?
Yeah, 17% from Hariyama, which is insane. But I mean, given all the factors, I mean, it makes sense, right? It actually having to deal with burn, not having guts, it being intimidated. I mean, obviously, it wasn't able to do a lot of damage. It just feels so weird to see that number coming from it.
Yep. And the Articuno, it just blasted off Shadow Balls for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, one notable thing is that we saw it in game one, but the Sylveon had to have been really bulky, as in game two, we saw it take 43% from a Bronzong Gyro Ball.
Granted, the Sylveon is somewhat slower, so Gyro Ball,
It's slow, yeah. I'm not going to say it was like a 500 base power
it
move,
is, of
but
course,
that's
super
still a
effective.
super effective Gyro Ball from Bronzong, one of the slowest Pokemon in the game, and with a pretty decent attack stat still. That thing used to run banded sets in previous generations.
Oh, don't remind me. Um, but yeah, we do see a very impressive bulk coming out from the Sylveon, and the game's just, especially game two, just goes so cleanly to,
Yeah, game two, after turn one, it was pretty much over. Like, really, I think T's biggest mistake in game two was simply not bringing the Flutter Mane. Because if it was there, then it possibly could have been something to deal with the Gardecuno, something to potentially outspeed it, maybe being able to do decent damage. Obviously, it doesn't have Shadow Ball because of the Imprison, but it was still, doing something. But, I mean,
it uses
yeah,
Dex.
Unova didn't even have to Terra this game.
Did we see? We did see Terra last game.
Yeah, we
Um,
did. But game two, Unova didn't even have to Terra. It was just an insanely dominant victory where T had no real way to stop what Unova was doing.
Even if T was able to deal with the Articuno, having Sylveon in the back, it was
Well,
just
yeah, I mean,
so
Sylveon just ruined him game one.
Yeah, so much offensive pressure coming from, having the Articuno and the Sylveon. It
Mhm.
just so much damage coming from that Tenacity is not getting Trick Room up, getting Hariyama in the worst state possible. It just did not go well.
But yeah, so the set did end up going to the Tartarus Tandemaus, which leaves Unova as one of the currently top 3 ranked players at 5-1. That's right, there are only 3 people with a record better than 4-2 at the current moment. And Unova is one of them.
Yep. And that leads us to our next set
Hmm.
of Colorado Choodle versus Dublin the Blades
Hmm.
with
The Colorado Choodle is coached by Fred, while Dublin Doughblade's coached by Celosis.
Cell bringing Regieleki, Decidueye Hisuian, Sableye, Tornadus Therian, Dugtrio, and Beartick.
Yep, and then on Fred's side, we do see the Chen Pao, Abomasnow, the Hisuian Arcanine, Scyther, Pawmot, and Gallade.
Yep. And starting with game one, we see Auroraville go off almost uncontested.
Yeah, I mean, Cell incorrectly tries to fake out the Scyther, presumably to prevent Tailwind, but because of that, Abomasnow, who actually outsped the Hisuian Decidueye, was able to just get up Aurora Veil. And with it, Triple Arrows only did 33%.
Yep. It is to note Decidueye is generally pretty slow by base stats,
Yeah.
but by
Mhm.
training, people of course try to make it faster. And Abomasnow, it rarely runs speed investment.
But I mean, clearly that wasn't the case here, as both of them actually have the exact same base speed stat, but it's clear that Fred just invested more into speed with his Abomasnow compared to Cell and their Decidueye. Which, believe me, I was genuinely caught off guard by it. It's not something I ever really realized, I will say.
Nope, Decidueye is really pretty slow actually.
It's pretty slow, yeah.
um, but nonetheless, we do see triple arrows doing damage that triple arrows really should not be doing.
Yeah. Hmm.
And with Aurora Veil up, Fred is not going to take a lot of damage, especially when you get the freeze onto Decidueye.
Yeah, I mean, Abomasnow was able to just keep firing off blizzards uncontested before, the Decidueye gets frozen. I mean, after the fact, Cell reveals Rain Dance, and had that come out earlier, they may have actually been in a solid spot, but Fred was able to just get too much out of his snowball. He had it up. He was able to get the perfectly accurate blizzards. He was able to get the Aurora Veil. It was just too little too late for the Rain Dance to really matter.
Mind you, this Rain Dance also ruined Cell's own plan because the
Yeah. Hmm.
Tornadus was running Heat Wave, which had the snow been off, it would have done a lot of damage.
Yeah, but
But
because
with
of the rain, it was weakened.
yeah,
And I mean, insult to injury, the turn they finally switch it because they heat wave for like 2 turns, and the turn they finally switch it up and go for Bleak Wind Storm instead, Abomasnow comes in, gets rid of the rain, and on top of that, the Bleak Wind Storm double misses. And by this point, Cell's just way too far behind, and Fred is able to take game one.
yep. And then it is to note that Fred did pretty quickly deal with Sableye, which is, of course, the trend of the series to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
deal with Sableye. And
Yeah.
then
I mean, going into game two,
it is
we
so
see
much
Cell
more
attempt.
offensive.
Yeah. We see Cell try and do stuff, with Sableye, but I mean Fred doesn't really let them, right? Like it pretty much immediately dies. At the very least, the Sableye is able to set up rain before it dies, but it doesn't accomplish that much because of how much pressure Fred put on.
Yeah, Fred did not go for the Aurora Veil with the Abomasnow, just kind of protected it a little bit, and then just repositioned with having
Yeah, and just
the
pivoting around, getting snow back up, getting damage on the Hisuian Decidueye. Fred was just playing clean, solid Pokemon. There's really not much to critique about their play here. It was just good.
yep, and like it was pretty cleanly in Fred's favor. And it was a pretty
Mhm.
clean game overall. The freeze onto Decidueye aside, there wasn't a lot that went openly wrong
Right,
until
yeah, like game 1, there was a bit of unfortunate luck on Cell's end, but it wasn't like it didn't look game deciding, at least from the outside. It's very possible that it would
No.
have completely changed certain lines, but that's all speculatory.
I will say maybe the Tornadus, when it was firing off heat waves, maybe it was predicting Obama Snow to come back in earlier.
Yeah, that's what I assume it had to have been doing. But again, just got a bit unlucky in that, the turn so finally gave up and just went for Bleak Windstorm. Obama Snow came in.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if that was intentional, great mind games from Fred.
yeah. But
Hmm.
this game does go 2-0 very quickly to Fred, actually. These games did not last very long.
Yeah, Fred just had really solid offense, kept the pressure on, and was able to just get a nice, solid, clean win. Which, saying that, goes into our next match, which, hey, for once, I'm not part of like the last three. This is the
No.
Santa Maria Samurats, coached by me, versus the Southampton Smug Leafs, coached by Jamie Boyd.
Yep. And um, I am going to give the floor up to our
Yes,
friendly
as is
host.
tradition at this point.
But
Hmm.
I will say one thing, a small spoiler, in fact. The Jamie Boyd has been hit by Focus Blast for 2 weeks in a row, and I find that hilarious.
It was the best option I had. What, you think I'm running Aurisphere?
If the calcs worked, I assume they didn't.
They didn't.
Okay, then. And with that,
Regardless.
Limevolt, all to you.
Yep. So, starting off with the teams, Jamie
Oh,
did
right.
bring the female Basque Legion, Baxcalibur, Iron Thorns, Kilowattrel, Crocodile, and Moltres.
And
Meanwhile, I brought Fungus, Armor Rouge, Annihilate, Donphan, Tauros, and Klefki. And so, game one, I was able to get up Trick Room. I was able to put a decent amount of pressure on thanks to both Fungus and Armor Rouge. I put some stuff to sleep. I kept Armor Rouge healthy with Pollen Puff, all the fun stuff. Soon after, I actually showed Clear Smog because, as we've seen, Boyd is very happy to click a lot of setup moves, so I wanted to have that as an option. However, the Clear Smog was not clicked to get rid of like a Dragon Dance or a Swords Dance or anything. It was actually clicked into my own Armor Rouge to have Terragrass Weakness Policy activate and Oko Baxcalibur, before it's then able to deal with Thorns, and Moltres gets taken care of by Donphan, giving me a very decisive Game 1 win.
it was actually almost terrifying to see that game one with Boyd being one of the scariest players in the league. And you just played around it. Granted, Focus Blast, I think you clicked it
Yeah,
twice this
but you
game.
can only play with Focus Blast so well.
Yeah, but
Regardless, uh, I appreciate the kind words, but I wouldn't get your hopes up too much for anyone listening that hasn't watched the replays, because game two.
Frozen
So
Limevolt cooked a little bit.
I tried to go a different route, which proved to be very ineffective. I led with Klefki and Tauros to try and intimidate him and set up Reflect to weaken Boyd's team a lot. Essentially, I just wanted to like neuter his offense so that I would be able to win a more like war of attrition type thing, right? However, you might have noticed something with what I said. Intimidate and Reflect. Great options, but they only deal with physical attackers. A good switch into Moltres just demolished my team. By turn three, while I have his backs and Moltres to deal with, I'm left with just Donphan, who Boyd is able to easily just 2v1. And game three, we really see the Moltres just be an insane problem. Like, I try and go back to my game one idea, right? But Jamie adapts well. He keeps his threats safe while he waits out Trick Room. I'm able to do some damage, but really, my biggest issue this set was clear. I did not respect Moltres. Some good pivots managed to let him escape Trick Room as the Moltres just comes in. It nearly Oko's Annihilate, while Bax deals some damage to Donphan, which left the ape alone and at 7% against a full health Bax. Like, he did, like, the Baxcalibur did good, but really, I don't think I can emphasize this enough. The Moltres just destroyed me. I
If you
was
if you had
so
one more
underprepared for it that
Pokemon,
it basically soloed my whole team. I was just really focused on Jamie's core physical threats that I completely neglected to really invest in a check, be it, investing in special bulk or just having like a really solid way to deal with it. Combine that with having the fact that most of my terrors be something that Moltres hits something super effectively, and the bird just destroyed me. Had I prepped with it more in mind, things may have gone differently, but I mean, hey, props to Boyd for after that game one finding such a glaring hole in my team and exploiting it to high hell. It was a very good set.
yep. It,
Smeargle, you have anything that you would like to add there?
I was just going to say, if you had one more Pokemon in that endgame, it would have played out so much differently. But
Hmm.
Boyd pretty much maneuvered. He picked off certain Pokemon at different times, and like you played great. Boyd played around that with the Moltres was a really good pick. And are Moltres and Charizard in different tiers? Because
Uh, yeah, the Moltres and Charizard are in different tiers. Yes,
okay, I was going
and
to
I think
say
there's a very clear reason for that. They are not even comparable.
yeah, Moltres is definitely better than Charizard in
Yeah,
every way except for speed.
and I mean, even then, who cares about Charizard's speed? It's so middling.
Hey,
And does that thing get Tailwind? Moltres does.
Charizard does too.
Does it? I honestly wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Yeah,
Regardless, that's how insignificant it is. Regardless, yeah, Moltres was great. Boyd played really well. I had a big issue in team building, and he just fucking he turned
he
that tiny hole
exploded
into just a massive cavern.
it. um, wait,
He completely undermined my whole team, and props on him for finding that. Because I mean, evidently I didn't. But yeah, so with that, Boyd does get the set, which unfortunately puts me down to 4-2, but hey, still a good slot. And it does put Boyd up to 5-1, being the other person who is currently 5-1. And I mean, hey, again, I'll say it. I've only lost two sets, and they've both been to two of the top ranking players in the league. I will take that. You're
absolutely.
never going to be upset about the people you lose to being the number one and number 2/3, respectively.
Nope. I mentioned resistance earlier. I will say Lime probably has a good resistance.
There's a chance.
Prob
I mean, hey, who knows? I could just throw the next 2 weeks, go 4-4 total, and not be able to make playoffs. Is possible.
we know that's not going to happen. You have to intentionally.
You want to
uh,
bet? I mean,
no.
regardless,
I want you to
going
do
into the
well.
next set, I appreciate the kind words. Going
We
into the next set,
have.
we do have it. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. What team was it?
We have the Giddy Goomies, coached by Fro, versus the Children of Arceus, coached by Valorn.
This set was interesting. First of all, we have Fro bringing Oricorio, uh, Ballot form,
Bailey,
Bailey form, Thunderous
the
Incarnate,
Fire one.
Rotom Heat, Scovillain, Mimikyu, and Flamigo.
Yep, on the other end, we do have Valorn with the Volcarona, Corviknight, Iron Treads, Chansey, Umbreon, and Hydreigon.
This set, I don't want to say a lot of bad things, but it was just so weird from Valorn. The plays
There
that
was some
they
odd
went for.
plays, yes.
They went
Mhm.
for um, Quiver Dance in front of Oricorio, which set up a substitute. And then, which is always a bold move to Quiver Dance in front of Oricorio because we've talked about Oricorio. So either they
Yeah.
are not listening to the podcast at all, or
I mean, I don't blame them if they don't want to. There's no obligation to listen to it. It's great for the people that do enjoy tuning in, but I don't mean to imply at all that this is something you should be listening to.
no, or they just don't know what Oricorio does, which any amount of prep
I mean,
would have,
it's possible. I mean, Oricorio is not a Pokemon you ever see outside of Draft League, so I don't entirely blame them for not being super well versed in it.
but just taking one look at its ability, just, oh, maybe don't use moves with dance in the name. Let's use Quiver Dance. And I'm
Right.
only saying it like that because across the games that we see it three different times.
Yeah, like one is a completely reasonable error.
First,
Two is a fine mistake. Three is a bit questionable.
especially when the second and third are in the same game.
Yeah.
It's just, and
But yeah,
then we see Chansey again coming out using Stealth Rocks in the latter half of the game. Uh,
at this point we're pretty disconnected. Let's
yeah,
go ahead and just
going
like
back
go
in.
through the game, because I have no intent to shit talk or talk down to Valorant at all. That is
No,
not what we're here to
I
do, and
don't
I
either.
don't
It's
ever
just
want to make it sound. Yeah,
No, it was just a number of weird turns, but getting into the actual game, we do see again the um, Oricorio getting what's it called?
a substitute. Yep.
Substitute up, and then the
Yeah, which
Scoville
I personally really like that play. Like
and
as we've mentioned in previous weeks, like we've criticized Fro's team for being slow, but here we see an honest, genuine attempt to work around that. As turn one, the Scoville just goes for Rage Powder as Oricorio sets up a substitute to keep itself safe for future turns. Like that's good. That's solid.
and the Moody boost on Scovillain was a
Yeah,
+2
Scovillain
to
ends
its
up getting a
attack.
Swords Dance boost. So, despite the fact that Valorant does, try and set up with Volcarona and trigger Oricorio's Dancer, it doesn't really matter as the Oricorio just goes for Baton Pass into Flamigo, which
Fun
allows it
fact,
to have Co-Star activate and get the +2 Swords Dance boost from Moody.
fun
And with the
fact,
sub still in fact.
the Flamigo, when it activates CoStar, it actually gets rid of any stats it previously had, which is
Yeah,
an
it
interesting
copies the
interaction.
ally's stats in that it copies all of them, even the ones that are not affected. Or that are standard, rather.
And the Flamigo running a White Herb allows it to get rid of its item and stat drop. Flamigo, being a flying type,
Yep.
can run Acrobatics.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
with Acrobatics and Close Combat, that's most of Valorant's
yeah, the
team
free
covered.
swords dance. Yeah, the free swords dance, the sub. Flamigo just tore through this team. Like, Valorant did have some decent ideas here, right? Like, after trying to set up with the Volcarona, having the heal pulse from Chansey to try and keep it healthy, it didn't work out in this instance, obviously, but it was a solid idea. But, I mean, from there, yeah, Flamigo just completely cleans up. Nothing can be done. The Chansey tries to set up stealth rocks for some reason. But yeah, this game was a complete sweep for Fro.
Stealth Rocks,
And going into game
the
two,
thing
as was
about this
mentioned,
game, Stealth Rocks
mhm.
would have actually been an impact in the beginning of the game. We do see the
Mm,
Flamigo switching a little bit around if the game lasted more than the turns that it did.
sure, yeah, because Flamigo is neutral, but like Oricorio, for example, is 4 times weak to rocks, so like that would have been half its health.
Yep,
Like
you
if that was turn one rocks, you could argue that there's something there.
yep, you see
But
four
this was
Pokemon on the team
it
that
was
can
not
get
that.
chipped by it, really. But setting it up after like half of your team is gone is questionable at best. Chansey is a
Yeah.
really good cleric option. It just
Hmm.
hasn't been used as one. And this is, I think, the second or third week in a row that Valorant has done this with
Yeah.
Stealth Rock
It just
specifically.
hasn't been good. But yeah, going into game two, as was mentioned, Valorant tries to just quiver dance in front of Oricorio, but this time, I mean, to be fair, right? Like after that quiver dance, Valorant is able to do something. It kills the Scovillain, it breaks the sub. Volcarona's about half health, but then the Volcarona makes a really odd switch. They try to bring in Umbreon where the Volcarona was, but I mean, Hydreigon. I mean, it clicks Tailwind while it was already up, and that Hydreigon just dies to Froze Mimikyu. Volk comes back in, tries to Quiver Dance again, but Oricorio gets
Is
the
sitting right
boost
there.
again and tries to just delete it. And from there, Umbreon tries to Wish Stall, but it's unable to do anything as it and Corviknight both just die before they get to do anything.
Yep. I of course don't want to make Valorant seem like a bad player. It's just they are actually a pretty good player. I've seen their team shine. It's just you don't see it very often because like they have a bunch of very good Pokemon. It's just they're using them in weird ways. If you got like the
Right.
Quiver Dance off and then kept it in, just went for Heat Waves, went for even a good Terra could
Hmm.
have changed the match. But we see
Yeah.
so many fighting weaknesses as well. We see it
Yeah,
just
that is true. This team does have 4 fighting weaknesses.
yeah. And
That
granted,
is very true.
you might expect to not see Flamigo, but that's
I mean, if you have 4 fighting weaknesses on your team, you kind of have to expect the Flamigo to come, especially when has been a mainstay of Fro's team in previous weeks.
yeah, we've seen that Valorant's team it can do some really good things, but Valorant
Yeah.
it's maybe stay off the stealth rocks and just
Stay off the Stealth Rocks, kid.
Yeah,
Regardless, yes.
I went down that road. It's just
We saw how they ended up.
pretty damn good. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna say it, but
Stay off the Stealth Rocks.
stay off the Stealth Rocks. My team was suited for Stealth
But
Rocks. This team is not.
yeah. Stay off the Stealth Rocks.
So if Allen
Regardless,
has some
yes.
really good options, if they played their team a little differently, it might be really much like you
Yeah, a
might
lot
see
of the
some great
Pokemon just
improvement.
aren't being used in the ways they needed to be able to shine. If they were built even just a bit differently, then we could potentially see some cool stuff. Because I
You
mean,
could,
even if I'm not going to sugarcoat it at this point, Valorn is thoroughly out of playoff potential. But there's still 2 weeks to just mess around, have fun, try and get a couple wins, and just see what else you can do with your team. And
yeah,
hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
yep. We could see some really cool things from the Corviknight Iron Defense Body Press if you're against a team with like the three fire types, maybe a Terra Water. Even Terra Water, Terra
Mhm.
Blast could have been huge in this matchup. There was
True.
nothing stopping. There was no real like stopping power from Valorant's team where there could have
Even
been
just
a
something,
lot.
yeah, even just something like a Terra Electric, be able to hit that Oricorio and Flamigo super effectively while resisting their flying moves, like that could have been really impactful. But
I
who
don't know
knows?
how many people would think of Terra Electric specifically. Terra Water is even
Terra Water is a lot more common than Terra Electric, but I
it is
mean,
it's still it's a
we
good
we we've seen Terra Electric do a lot of great things. Be it something like on
absolutely.
in main league on Iron Hands. I don't know if you remember this back in like early meta. Terra Electric Fluttermane was actually super popular because it resisted steel. It was
Uh
cool.
I seem to yeah, didn't it also sometimes run
hmm
Thunderbolt for Gyarados?
Yep, it ran Thunderbolt for Gyarados and all that. But
Yeah,
yes, with all
interesting.
this said, Fro does take the win. And moving on to our next set, we do have the Stockholm Sprigatitos, coached by Kemmel, versus the Spikemuth Sylveons, coached by Sky.
With Sky bringing Gyarados, Fletchling, Gengar, Gardevoir, Iron Jugulus, and Iron Hands.
Yep, Kemmel has the Pelipper, Basculegion, uh, the Dreadnought, Landorus, Berserker, and Steve Jobs. And
Steve
going
Jobs
immediately
himself.
into game one, Gulpin shows up again. It shows up again.
Yeah, it shows up again. It gets a move off, I think.
Kemmel, why are you doing that? If you just want to say because it's funny, I respect the shit out of that. It's hilarious.
Oh, it is.
But the thing is,
I
you're
don't
not
think
out of this yet.
Kimmel's had a single nickname other than Steve Jobs being named D's, and I think that's great.
Yeah, that's the only nickname that has been on their team.
It was
But yeah, like
Stockpile.
yeah, and the thing is, like looking at their record after week 6, Kemmel's not out of this. It's very possible they make playoffs. That's a completely reasonable possibility.
But with Gulpin,
With Gulpin, you got a bit more questionable.
I will
But I mean,
say
yeah,
from Sky's End, we do see the return of Dragon Dance Gyarados.
yeah,
Um,
I it I mean, it's pretty solid, all things considered. Like Steve Jobs aside, right? Like Kemmel tries to pivot Landorus to debuff the Gyarados, but the Dragon Dance, as you mentioned, it's able to counteract that. Fletchling gets up a Tailwind. It taunts Steve Jobs, preventing it from stacking stockpiles. But a double up the following turn lets Sky KO the Landorus before Basculegion comes in and KOs the Gyarados. You want to know what move it used to KO the Gyarados?
Head Smash.
Head Smash.
I don't think.
Regardless of that, though, from there, Iron Hands and Gengar come in, and they just put on so much pressure that Sky is able to just sort of dismantle the rest of Kemmel's team.
Yep. We do see some pretty good plays from Gengar coming from this. We do see the Gyarados really punched like the defining hole, and then
True.
from there, I feel like even losing the Gyarados, it was still the tempo was in Sky's favor.
Yeah, it worked well because it gave her a free switch into
Yeah, just
more physically intimidating Pokemon. Not literally intimidating with the ability, but ones that put on more pressure.
yep. The Iron Hands takes does a bunch of damage. The Gengar cleans up the damage, and it just
It
basically,
worked.
yeah, it goes to Sky pretty
But I mean,
convincingly.
speaking of things that just work, So game two, right? Camel leaves Landorus for the Intimidate before pivoting into Pelipper to enable Dreadnought, who sets up Shell Smash. And thanks to a Terra Grass, it resists Iron Hand's Wild Charge, and it just rips through Sky's team. Really, there isn't much else to say about this game. Dreadnought just cleaned. It's something we've seen happen more and more as the weeks get deeper. This thing is putting in work.
Yep. This game, second game lasts, I think, 6 turns, setup included. So
Yeah.
Dreadnought, it just once you set up your Dreadnought, you need an answer to it, and I don't think
Hmm.
Sky could run anything that like
It's insane that in Gen 8 Dreadnought had a unique form exclusive to it, yet Gen 9 where it lost that form is where all of a sudden it started to shine.
to be fair, if Dreadnought's Gmax move was the water, it was the
It
rock
was
type move instead of
useless, yeah.
water.
I think it was like
The
it wasn't Cannonade, that was Blastoise. It was bad is all
it,
that needs to be
the
remembered.
the water type move set up stealth rocks, and the rock type move reset the weather to get rid of the swift swim. If it was the other way around, Dreadnought might have seen some use.
Maybe, yeah.
It saw some use in its non Gmax form. That let's
Yeah, it's not even like point actually did some stuff.
yeah.
Regardless though,
Shell Smash just
yeah,
kind
game
of
two, Kemmel wins.
yeah.
Now going into game three, there's actually a bit more to talk about. Turn
Yay!
one,
I like talking.
yeah, turn one, yeah, I agree. Turn one, Sky tears the Iron Jugulus into water to protect against the Pelipper and the Landorus, which I personally thought meant that a Terra Blast was going into the Landorus. However, we just see it as a defensive Terra to resist the Rock move, which, I mean, notably, the Rock move we do see is Rock Tomb. Which great move, it's solid, just not something you usually expect from Landorus. You usually expect to see Rock Slide, maybe Stone Edge.
You might see some Rock Tomb here and there if
Yeah,
it's
like
a
Rock Tomb is not bad. I don't want to paint it as if it's like this insanely weird left pick. It's just it's not something you see super often, and it's cool to see.
yeah. We do see Sky
Um,
having some pretty good early turns, but
oh, definitely, yeah,
what really sent her like Sky did lose a lot of pace when Helping Hand Rock Slide took a huge KO on Gyarados,
hmm,
and that it was the start of the downfall for Sky because by that point in the game, there was damage across like the entire board, and it was the end game was down to Iron Hands. If the Gyarados was able to stick around for like one more turn, the Iron Hands would have had more support. It just did not go in Sky's favor with the Helping Hand Rock Slide getting the KO.
yeah. I mean, in general, one thing we saw from Kemmel that was really great this game was saving the Terra. Like Terra is something that's almost always spent pretty early in a match. However, Kemmel's saving the Terra for that late game option, as it turns Pelipper into a ghost type, it one
Which
lets it
was
be immune to
huge.
fake out, and because it's no longer 4 times weak to electric, it's able to actually KO the Iron Jugulus before Dreadnought and Gara both, just trade with each other. Which, as you mentioned, left the hands by itself as the Pelipper and Bascu Legion were able to come out. And I mean, one wave crash later, Kemmel got the set. If their Terra had been spent earlier in the game, it's very possible Sky would have been able to get that, but it ended up working out really well for Kemmel. Good shit there.
Yep, Helping Hand is a good move.
Helping Hand is a good move. Saving Terra can be quite useful. Good stuff all around, honestly.
Yeah,
With the
Terra.
exception of the game two, which didn't have much to say, this was a pretty cool set to watch, all things considered.
Yeah, even game two is fun to watch. It's really fun to
Mhm.
watch these sweeps. It's just
Yeah, it's
not
fun to
very.
watch. It's not that interesting to talk about.
Yeah. Um, Dreadnought takes 4 KOs. Congratulations. Shake my hand.
Mm.
Um,
Yep.
we this does bring up an interesting topic though of how a Terra like there is of course the huge debate of how a Terra should be used, and I think
Yeah.
these games were a huge example of how Terra can be used.
Yeah,
Games
and
two and
just being
three,
used in very different ways. Yeah.
we see the Terra Grass coming out from the Dreadnought like turn two, turn one
Hmm.
to as a defensive Terra, and
Yeah.
it makes use of that. And we see this in the previous week as well. The Dreadnought goes into a Terra Grass to be immune to a sleep powder.
Hmm.
And then it, of course, takes over the game because Sky lost a huge turn. And then we see in game 3, the Pelipper has a Terra Ghost, which is another huge swinging Terra that it saved until so late into the game. So these games are very interesting to watch, partly because of how the people playing preserve or use their Terras. We see people that win
Hmm.
games because they saved it, or win games because they had that one great turn because of Terra. And then we see people lose it because maybe the Terra went the wrong way or just something happened.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Terra is just such like it can be such an insane swing in any given scenario. Like allowing a Pokemon to take a KO it normally wouldn't, allowing a Pokemon to live something it normally wouldn't, being able to be immune to fake out. There's just so many ways it can be applied. And it's such an interesting mechanic that I will admit when Gen 9 first debuted, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I've come to actually quite like it. It's definitely interesting. It's done a good job shaking up the formula.
Yeah, I have not played much VGC myself, but
Oh, I mean, most of what I've played has just been in this draft league. I mean, in this draft league, be it past seasons or the current. But I mean, even here, it's fun. It's cool.
yeah, my most of my experience actually comes from this league as well, the past season,
Yeah.
and then I played a little bit of VGC as well. Terra,
Hmm.
when it first came out, it felt of it's of course the Wild West of Terras. You don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
When it was back in the Wild West, Terra was it was awful to play with and against. It felt terrible. It felt like you were getting robbed of games. It felt like you were robbing games. But now that things have settled a bit more and it's more understood, it's a genuinely nuanced mechanic, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, I
Very
feel
three
like
dimensional.
I feel like I always have these opinions. Dynamax came out, and I'm like, no.
Oh, I love Dynamax from the start, and I will continue to say that was the best regional gimmick ever. But
It was
that's
the
a
wild,
conversation I shouldn't get into.
yeah, the Wild West of Dynamax was crazy
Yeah.
as well.
Hey, Wild West of Dynamax was fun. I remember Durant. That was awesome.
That wasn't Wild West. That was a team.
It might have been might as well have been Wild West. It
I'm
was so
talking.
early in the development of
I'm
it.
talking day one, man.
Sure, day one it was silly, but I mean, what gimmick isn't silly? Game one, come
But
on,
then you
or
see
day one, I mean.
But then as it settles down, you do see the gimmicks settle down a little bit. You start to understand it more, how to utilize it.
Hmm.
And I think that's really interesting to see draft leagues
Hmm.
using these concepts that in VGC, people like have their defined teams. And then it feels like a blend almost of the Wild West and the defines because you see like
Hmm.
powerful Terras and defensive Terras coming out, and it's really interesting to watch in this league.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But with that, I think we
Yep.
should head straight into the next match because this is oh boy, is it a match. We
Oh, this is
have
a good one.
yeah, we have the Miami Heat Trans coached by Nine versus the Kill Team King Gambits coached by Nilly.
With
Nilly brought the Iron Hands, the Hydreigon, the Delphox, the Sableye, the Bisharp, and the Bruxish.
with 9 bringing Haxorus, Moltres Galar, Florges, Heatran, Quaquaval, and Brute Bonnet.
And I mean, right away. Like, Nine does a great job at stopping Nilly from taking any early advantage. They get off Tailwind, they burn Bisharp. And I mean, Nilly tries to do some good stuff. They get up Light Screen, they have a Sword Stance to help mitigate that burn, but I mean, following that, Goltris just taunts Sableye to prevent it from being a nuisance. And I mean, Nine just played so well these first couple early turns.
Yup. Even if you get the Swords Dance off, you basically wasted your first turn getting that burn off,
Hmm.
which was
Yeah.
huge for 9. You don't often see Will-O-Wisp coming out from Heatran. And
Yeah, it's not the most common move.
when you do, it just swings the entire games. If you see that
Hmm.
onto, you have Iron Hands, you have um, the Bisharp, maybe even depending on the set, the Bruxish. That's just 2 to 3 of your team that just their damage is just immediately gone. You see
Yeah, I mean, it's just halved.
the Bisharp brings it back with the Sword Stance, and it's pretty much just a wasted turn, to be honest. It gets off a Sword Stance, great, its attack is back to normal, but it's like firing off Night Slashes that just aren't doing the damage you want a Sword Stance boosted Bisharp to do. And then the taunt
But
onto
yeah.
the Sableye, again, dealing with Sableye is a huge thing. Taunt works
Hmm.
just as well as deleting. In fact, it
Yeah.
sometimes works even better because for as long as that Sableye is on the field, it's not doing anything. It might
Mhm.
fire
I
off
mean,
a
it can get
foul
some
play.
damage with foul play, but yeah, it's generally not going to be doing much. But so following that, just some general good pivots all around. Quaquavil's able to get rid of the Bisharp, triggering Moxie and the Aqua Step speed boost. However, Nilly themselves were able to get Sableye out and back in to shake off that taunt. And following that, we saw an excellent Terra from Nilly, as going Terra Water on the Iron Hands to not be weak to the Terra Ground Quaquaval or the Earth Power from Heatran. I mean, it was such a huge swing. As we mentioned, like Terra can be used in that super swingy nature, and it was great here, turning that double up, which would have probably killed due to weakness, and something was able to pretty comfortably live, and then just drain punch the Heatran for recovery. Following that, though, we saw an ice punch from Iron Hands, and it
Yay!
does end up freezing Quaquaval, which, to be entirely honest, may have actually costed Nine the game, as it's possible that the close combat from the Quaquaval could have actually KO'd Hydreigon through Reflect due to the Moxie boost. I'm not saying that it guaranteed would have, or that the guaranteed the freeze did win the game for Nilly, but I mean, it was a pretty even board state, and that freeze just completely opened the game up for Nilly, which allowed them to just run him over from that point and got him the win.
Yeah, the um Nilly does get some good turns. It knocks off things like
Hmm.
the Moltres' Citrus Berry, but
Yeah,
end of the turn, you wish that the Bisharp would have died to the burn because the Aqua Step again
true.
from Quaquaval procs the Moxie, and if not for that freeze, it might have just KO'd through Reflect because
Yeah.
of that boost. And that freeze, honestly, it just ruined all of the
Oh
momentum
yeah, it
that
was super impactful. That
yeah.
that's the freeze that you post a clip of on Twitter, and everyone in the comments is just begging for Frostbite to be added to the game.
Yeah, please don't add Frostbite.
Please add Frostbite.
No. Freeze is balanced.
It's If it's Frostbite or Freeze, I'm taking Frostbite. Anyways,
Freeze is
going into
balanced.
game two, we do see Nilly try to get a little bit cheeky. They set up Light Screen, and they try to go for a trick in order to try and cripple Florigist.
Hey, I'll take your
However,
choice specs if you take mine.
yeah, it is shown that Delphox and Florigist are both choice specs, so the trick does nothing.
You are now choice
Sableye gets
specs locked
O-Code,
into
and
trick.
Delphox takes 65% from Earth Power despite the Light Screen. Hands tries to come in, and it tears to not be weak to that monster Moonblast, but it still gets burned by Heatran's Wisp. And from that point, I mean, Nine's just so far ahead. Haxorus switches in, gets Nilly's Pokemon down to super low. I mean, the only notable thing to say about this game beyond that is the fact that Quaquaval had a Pyapa Berry to have the damage of Psychic moves, and it died to Psychic anyways from full health.
Yep. And I do think
Maybe it was for Psychic Fangs and it was physically defensive. I'm not gonna
maybe
place
they
any
weren't
bets on that
expecting
though.
specs, to be fair.
Yeah, maybe they weren't expecting specs. That's fair. Maybe it was for like Life Orb or even just, a more neutral thing. Maybe if it was like timid Life Orb or timid and then not a boosting item.
It is
Who
also to
knows?
note that the Hydreigon was pretty slow. They were talking
Yes.
about it possibly being Iron Ball. Nilly did not confirm
Interesting.
during the set what it was, but it was outsped by Florges,
Right.
um, which is just huge. Nilly does say that
Mhm.
they were expecting more of a Trick Room composition, so they went for slower.
Right.
Possibly the Iron Ball, that was heavily implied, but it was never confirmed. And yeah, it just being outsped by Florges again 4 times a week. And
I mean, at the
well,
same time, Iron Ball doesn't even necessarily have to happen, right? Like, if the
that's
Hydreigon
true.
has
If it was
zero
just
speed,
slow.
if it has zero speed investment whatsoever, then it's 118 speed, and a max speed Florigis is 139. So it's very possible that the Hydreigon just was no investment in speed.
Yep. And then the burn on the Iron Hands, make sure it doesn't nearly get the recovery it wanted to um, from Drain
Hmm.
Punch. And Psychic from Delphox does KO through the Psychic
Yeah,
Resist Berry, which was kind of funny.
yeah. But even despite that, Nine was just so far ahead and just cleans this game.
And going into game 3, we see an immediate KO onto Coquavel, and Trick Room pretty much goes
Hmm.
up for only damage onto Iron Hands.
Yeah, I mean, Nine tries to double the Iron Hands, but as was said, it just lives. It Okro's Quavel as Bruxish sets up Trick Room. chilling water is then seen to try and debuff the Haxorus. However, a Terra Dragon from it makes it so that the Haxorus is actually still able to live and two-hit KO the Bruxish.
And
It did like I think 57% after the first chilling water, so the second chilling water probably wouldn't have KO'd, but the damage boost from that Terra Dragon definitely put it over the edge if it was a roll or otherwise not guaranteed.
I do think that the Haxorus might have also been rivalry.
Interesting. I hadn't
Um,
considered that.
Haxorus is
It's also possible that it was Unnerve. Unnerve is obviously just a very solid
no
ability.
Unnerv. You see, Moldbreaker and Unnerve are revealed.
Oh no, you're correct. Actually, yeah, both
It
of those
was
are revealed
rivalry.
abilities. So you're right. It was rivalry then. So if the Bruxus ended up being female, then it actually would have lived that.
In the game that I
Interesting.
watched, they were both female, or they were both the same gender, which means
Yeah,
rivalry did
they were
more.
both male. They were both male. Yes. So whew,
So
that's something I haven't seen since what, like 2013, when
20,
Haxorus was ran for to deal with the male locked genies.
2012, 2011, 2012.
Oh no, 2011, 2012. You're right. You're right.
I
Yeah.
don't think I ever saw it in third. I fell off in 2012. Actually, it was
Yeah,
2011.
I just got the year wrong.
Yeah, the Italian brothers in Worlds 2011. Oh man, that's a
Regardless of
flashback.
that, though, yeah,
Yeah,
it's been
rivalry
a minute.
Haxorus though.
Yeah, it put in work. The ability was good here.
I mean,
Regardless
granted,
of that,
I
though, yeah.
don't think
I mean,
any other build
hmm
like Moldbreaker wouldn't have done really much of anything considering the
yeah.
abilities on Nilly's
Unnerve
team.
is always just a solid ability at the very least. Like I
It
feel like
is.
most people would just go Unnerve just for the fact that turning off berries is always helpful.
Oh, it's pretty
Stopping
great. You turn
citrus,
off
stopping
Citroth.
weakness berries. If you want to be that guy, you can say that it turns off things like lychee berry.
You do see
Those
that
aren't really seen
sometimes.
in doubles, but like, I mean, I
We've
guess if your opponent has Oinkle,
we've seen them come out every now and then for no good
yeah,
reason.
yeah, for
But
no good reason,
yeah, it was a rivalry Haxorus.
yeah. But so going
And it
in,
went
yeah, so
crazy.
yeah, continuing with the game three, nine just starts pivoting around. First sending in Heatran to deal with the Bisharp, which it does. It eats an Iron Head and Night Slash before just OHKOing it with Earth Power. Switching Haxorus into Florigist to be immune to the switching the Haxorus into Florigist to be immune to a Draco Meteor from Hydreigon. And I mean, by this point, Nilly is up a KO, but Trick Room's about to expire. But then, Florigist lives a wild charge. I listen. I was shocked. My jaw was agape when it lived that thing. But I mean, it did, and thanks to it living, it was able to take down Nilly's remaining two, which gave 9 the win, making her 6-0 at the moment, and now she only has 2 more weeks in the main season to drop a set, and she's already faced some of the best players in the league. So the question becomes at this point, is there anyone left to try and stop her?
Their next game is against one of the 4-2 players, not even one of the 5-1s. They've already faced off.
Exactly, because the 5-1s have already played, yeah.
And I do want to know, going back into the game, Florges was running both Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam, which is a
hmm
really good play in this
Yeah,
set.
I mean, it's solid, especially when you're specs. It's nice having that variety between spread and, just single target damage.
And after week one, seeing Moonblast go into a Defiant Pokemon, it's got me thinking every time.
Yeah, fair. But
But
regardless, yes. Nilly was obviously quite solid. But 9 did get the win, putting her at 6-0.
incredibly scary.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on, we do have our next set with the Bodacious Bulbasaurs, coached by Amelia, and your boy Mario Fan. The
We got MF on the mic, coach of the Nottingham Nickets. And of
Yep,
course, his team is the Hisuian Typhlosion, Salamence, Urshifu, Murkrow, Colossal, and Rotom Mo.
with Amelia bringing Rillaboom, Sneasler, Overquill, Typhlosion Hisuian, Orthworm, and Magnezone.
Mm-hmm.
Which Magnezone, I don't think we saw, but it came up pretty good.
I Magnezone definitely has fallen off a lot in Gen 9, but I mean, I personally have a lot of fondness, especially back in Gen 8, just because it was a really solid Pokemon. It and Magneton were also just really solid Pokemon all around.
I don't think I ever
Uh,
understood those two, but I I I also just always had something that got rid of them, so I
yeah,
don't.
you also always had a slot on your team being taken up by Stealth Rock Chansey and Power Swap Shuckle.
I never ran Shuckle.
I don't know what you're talking about. Everyone, do not believe this man.
I never ran Shuckle.
Do not believe this man.
I
So,
never
getting
ran
into the games.
Shuckle.
Amelia was able to get Sneasler in behind a sub thanks to Shedtail. However, during this, MF just gets Tailwind up, which, I mean, obviously solid, always nice to see. But next turn, we see him make a genuinely really solid play. The Colossal, who's currently being threatened by both of Amelia's Pokemon, that being the Rillaboom and the Sneasler, gets switched into Mence for an Intimidate and to resist both of the attacks, while Murkrow actually breaks the Sneasler's sub with Drill Peck.
Yeah, that is not a move we see very often,
No.
but
But I mean, hey, it worked here. I mean, if you look at it, Amelia's team is actually somewhat flying weak, right? Like, you have the two steel types, sure, but also two of your biggest threats are both weak to flying.
and we do see this come up during the set actually. Both
Hmm.
Pokemon, I believe, get hit by flying type moves.
Yeah. But
Um,
following that really great play, that really solid switch into Mence, Mario Fan clicks Outrage
hmm,
in doubles.
uh, I mean, it's been working in BGC.
uh,
Dragonite's been using it.
has it
Uh,
actually? God,
yes, it actually has.
my goodness.
Choice banded, Choice band Dragonite has been running
I
Outrage.
don't want to. I don't want to hear about this anymore.
it's it's
Regardless,
been huge.
Tailwind gets set back up. Colossal switches into a Dire Claw and just gets sent to sleep. Which, unfortunately, at this point, despite being put to sleep by Dire Claw, Mario Fan terrors the Colossal and Drill Pecks it for weakness policy, despite being asleep.
Yeah, it
This doesn't work out. It just dies before
no.
it can do anything. I mean, at the very least, Murkrow is putting in work with its quashes, but by this point, Mario Fan actually just forfeits the game. I personally don't even think this game was over, but MF clearly decided otherwise. I want to make this very clear. I do not encourage forfeits in this league. Past seasons, it's been outright banned because of how stat keeping was tracked, and also just because anything is possible. As we always say, where there's a rock slide, there's a way. But with how pairings are being done this season and the differences in stat keeping, it is technically allowed, and we do actually see another one this week. It's just not something I ever really encourage.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even know that it was unbanned because of previous seasons until I was talking to Lime in the pregame or pre-recording. We were just talking about it, and I'm like, as far as I know, you can't really forfeit. And then that was when the news got broken to me. I'm like, that's interesting.
It's because of the way we handled it, because we tracked individual like Pokemon KOs and everything.
Yeah, you
So if
mentioned
you
who died
forfeited,
to
then it
what,
messed with
and
those numbers a bunch. Yeah. However, that's not being done this current season, so forfeiting is technically allowed. It's just again not something I really ever encourage.
yeah,
Regardless of that, though, going into game two, game one obviously went to Amelia. Going into game two, Rillaboom fucking tanks out dual wing beat from Mence. That thing lives. It lives at like 10%, but it still lives.
I do want to
It
going.
dies to the Urshifu's U-turn after it, but it still lived a dual wing beat from Mence. I want to put some emphasis on that. That's fucking crazy.
Hang on. Going back to game one real quick, Rillaboom
Yeah,
reveals
sure.
a specific move that we
Hmm.
didn't bring up. It's running bulk up.
Yeah, bulk up Rillaboom. Definitely not something you see super often. However, it kind of does make a little bit of sense. Mario Fan's team usually tends to be a little physically inclined, though this week it seems to be more special overall.
And it has
But I
helped.
mean,
We do see
it's something to help deal with Urshifu, right? Because normally, bulk up does nothing against it, but this is water Urshifu, so it's not going to want to click Surging Strikes into you usually. So its non-Surging Strike moves aren't guaranteed to crit, so it makes a little sense. I'm
we
I'm
also
not going
see
to like say all bad.
we also see it outweighing or balancing the Salamence intimidates as well.
True, true. Yeah.
But going back into game two,
Yeah, the Rillaboom just immediately gets doubled up and KO'd. It
yeah,
it
it
lives the
doesn't
dual
get.
wing beat for Mence. I wanna make that that's fucking crazy. I didn't think that was happening.
Yeah, we do see, especially in a later game, the Rillaboom is incredibly bulky. I want to say it was like
Yeah.
entirely bulk. Maybe that's why it was running bulk up even, just because of
Maybe, yeah.
all
It's
of the
just trying to
bulk.
be budget annihilate. It's like, monkey, bulky, bulk up,
Bulk up.
drain punch.
Oh yeah, it does get drink punch.
Yeah. It's got them big old fists.
Yeah, it's got a drum too.
Mhm.
Uh, but we
But yeah.
do see the hard focus on the Rillaboom, and the it U-turns into Rotom Mo.
Yeah, and the Rotom Mo actually goes for Terra Poison with Nasty Plot. And I mean, honestly, that's a really fucking good Terra here. Like, look at Amelia's team. There's nothing that threatens Terra Poison. Unfortunately, as it set up Nasty Plot, Amelia had Overquill out, who also set up a Swords Dance. And so at +2, it was just able to KO with Crunch. If that Rotom Mo was a bit bulkier, maybe it could have done something. Maybe if there was any possibility of being able to pivot Mence around, then maybe. But it was a good play. It was a solid idea. It just didn't end up working out.
Yep.
And I mean, to be fair, following that, Mence is able to KO Sneasler. Thanks to Intimidate, it lives the Poison Jab from Overquill. And I mean,
And this is
from
where
there,
we
yeah.
see the Magnezone come in. Um, the Salamence goes Terra Flying, actually.
it,
It does.
it,
Wait,
it we don't see Magnezone this game.
nope. Did I miss a game?
Game 2, Orthworm is the fourth.
Yep, my bad.
You're good. Regardless, by this point, yeah, you're yeah. That hey, it's all good. Regardless, yeah. By this point, Mario Fan's gotten rid of all of Amelia's offensive threats. So Earthworm, it tries to set up Iron Defense, but Urshifu just crits right through it. And Overquill isn't enough to do everything on its own. It put in work, but it didn't have the support it needed to really solo the whole team. So MF does get the game 2 and goes into game 3.
Going into game three, we see
Yeah,
Magnezone.
you seem pretty eager to talk about it. You got anything you want to say?
Yeah, it was pretty good. We do see the Salamence go with a Terra Flying, which is interesting as it was running Terra Blast as well as Dual Wing Beat.
Yeah, that was odd. I mean, if you're Terra flying on Salamence is fine. That makes sense. You get extra damage on your moves. You're not 4 times weak to ice, whatever. But running Terra Blast kind of is bad because it does less damage
And of course,
than the dual
you
wing beat,
do have
and
the
it takes up another move slot, and it requires Terra. Like, I guess you could say it was for accuracy, but even that's
yeah.
questionable at best.
Um, the only other thing that it can really help against kind of is if Amelia had any contacts abilities. Um,
I guess, but I mean, that's not something you're ever really seeing with this type of roster.
no, but we do see the Salamence go Terra Flying, becomes weak to lightning type moves, and Magnezone gets a pretty good, I think, Volt Switch off
Yeah.
and
I
takes it
mean,
pretty low.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Morrivan does make a pretty good play after that questionable Terra. Urshifu gets pivoted out into Murkrow as it was safely able to eat a Woodhammer. Amelia gets a great turn following that. However, Eruption, huh? You ever heard of that move? It's pretty
Yeah.
good. I mean, yeah, like Magnezone tries to do stuff, but Eruption,
Yep.
it takes down Overquill, it takes down Magnezone, it leaves Rilla at 2%. And that next turn afterwards, Murkrow quashes the Sneasler, and Hyflosion's able to just end the game. Which,
Yeah.
for those listening in at home, that means that MF is actually 3-3. And I mean, I real quick, I want to highlight the Murkrow, right? Like, it put in tons of work. MF has done a great job utilizing it, knowing when to pivot, when to commit. Really, it hasn't been long since Mario Fan was 0-3, but their improvement has been staggering. They're now finding themselves at 3-3, and I mean this when I say it, they have a potential qualifying spot for playoffs. That's not impossible.
It is really nice to
They went
hear.
0-3 the first 3 weeks, and yet they're not out of the race.
Yep. They we did mention early on that they over-relied on gimmicks, and we
Yes.
we did see a gimmick this time around, the drill pack
Yeah, we
into
saw something
Terra
try to
weakness
do,
policy,
but I mean, it didn't accomplish anything was the thing.
but they've been focusing a lot more on overall team compositions, and I think that's been huge for their team. For
Absolutely, because it's a solid all-around team. It's just when they tried to pigeonhole themselves into that one small niche, it didn't work out. But when you're able to play a lot more generalist and just use your tools where needed, it's a really good team.
it's also just easier to play without as many gimmicks.
Also true, yeah, it's
If
also
you're
just
stacking
yeah, it's simpler to
two
get
th-
used
2 or
to.
3
Yeah.
gimmicks into a team, you have to know when to use each gimmick, how to get each one
Mhm.
off. And if one
Yep.
goes sideways or you get like one half of each gimmick in at one time, it's just not going to work out. We've seen them have more
Mhm.
general teams and we see them like switching around. Um, a couple of questionable like team building ideas with mentioning the Terra Flying, Terra Blast as well as Dual Wing Beat. But other than that,
Mhm.
they've been doing great.
Yeah, I agree. Like, and I will say, I don't want to take any credit for this. Like, I gave some tips, I gave some pointers in past weeks. This week, Marvin, like, he submitted his team to me, said, like, hey, is there anything I can do to improve or whatever? I was actually quite busy. I wasn't able to respond at all. So everything we saw here was MF completely on their own. This was no input from me. And we saw some really good stuff. I mean it when I say their improvement has been so quick and so rapid that fuck, man. Give it another I feel like there's a chance they may start topping.
It even this like they could make top 8 and top 8 is huge
Exactly.
in of
They can
itself.
make playoffs in their very first season where they went 0-3 the first 3 weeks. If this isn't an underdog story, I don't know what is. God damn, like it's starting to feel like they may as well be the main character. Like, come on, it's crazy to see. I really do continue to look forward to them, continue to perform,
Absolutely.
but we will
So
see.
I remember I had this conversation with my girlfriend Michaela. We were talking about the
Mhm.
difference between VGC and draft leagues. I'm mentioning how draft leagues could be like so much harder on newer players because
Yes,
of
draft league can be very difficult on newer players.
because
Very
you
true.
have your pool of 11 Pokemon, they have their pool of 11, and like more than half of your team is like almost subpar Pokemon, that there is
Hmm.
definitely something that does it better. So you have to learn like such niche Pokemon before like you
Very true.
know like the actual game itself.
Hmm.
And if they're
Agreed.
doing this good with a team that they made in draft, I would be almost terrified to see them play like in actual VGC where you have the option to use like all of our S tiers in one team
True. They're very different formats, and there are some aspects that are going to be easier or harder between the two of them. But it is still really cool to see a newcomer to the league do so well. And I mean, hey, it's not like they're alone. People like Jamie Boyd, technically a newcomer to the league, though obviously a much more veteran player.
Yeah,
It's a weird, the way it works there.
yeah. Um,
Regardless of that, though,
yep,
um, it was a solid win from MF. Amelia obviously played pretty well. The team just didn't quite work out. But with that, I believe we should go into our next match, which would be the Saucy Spidops, coached by Jay, versus the Inazuma Iron Hands, coached by Robbie.
yep. Have noted every now and then that Robbie is a very scary player
Robbie is quite scary, but I mean, Jay did really well here. I mean, let's start with their team, right? Meowscarada, Baxcalibur, King Gambit, Salazzle, Slowbro, and Sylveon.
versus Robbie bringing Vivian Fancy Form, Ceruledge, Braviary, Quillfish Hisuian, Inteleon, and Magnezone.
Yeah,
Right
I
away,
mean,
we see a double up into Vivian getting it right off the field.
yeah, I mean, it's a decent defensive Terra on Jay's side. Fake Out comes out as both sides just set up a swords dance. And following that, Ceruledge actually reveals Terra Fairy, which, I mean, the defensive Terra in question was Kingambit going for Terra Dark, which you could argue isn't even really that defensive of a Terra, but, it gets rid of the fire weakness, right? Ceruledge reveals Terra Fairy, which, would hit King Gambit's Terra Dark really well. Of course, it does risk Iron Head, but if I'm not mistaken, we actually don't see Terra Blast. So that Terra Fairy was purely just defensive, so that it wouldn't be weak to a dark move.
Yeah, basically, like I can see that's, but also looking at the opponent's team, the only dark type Pokemon is Meowscarada and Kingambit.
What? I mean, there's two Pokemon that are innately weak to Fairy here with the Meowscarada and the Baxcalibur, and then King Gambit, who very commonly wants to go for something either like Terra Dark for damage or something like Terra Flying or Terra Ghost for defense. Like Terra Fairy and Terra Blast is a solid option here, all things considered.
And then not seeing the Terrablast is very interesting, especially considering the frailty of some of the
Yeah.
Pokemon. Hitting
Mm-hmm.
Meowscarada with a strong gust of wind is probably going to bring it down to Sash, and if it's not Sash, down to the grave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Baxcalibur, it might take a little more, but we often see, especially Robbie, running Cerulege with Sword Stance.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's put in work, like Swords Dance or Bulk Up, just like letting this thing set up, giving it like a clear amulet, whatever. It's been good. Regardless of that, going back to Jay's side for a moment, we saw Salazzle click Overheat with Eject Pack, which
It's great. We've seen this
oh my
before.
god, it does really good damage, and it then brings in Baxcalibur. So it brings in Baxcalibur, it Oko's Magnezone with Stomping like the Baxcalibur is able to Oko Magnezone with Stomping Tantrum after, and I mean yeah, as was said, Robbie at this point doesn't have Terra Blast on Ceruledge, so it's just it's kind of crazy on all things considered.
Yeah, it's Jay built their team like so well. I've really come to love the eject packs Lazzle. We've seen it
Hmm.
in a previous week, and it came up big then, and it's coming up
Hmm.
big again now, and I think that's just
Yeah.
really cool to see.
Hmm.
But throughout the game, Robbie just he gets picked off. Like
Yeah. I mean, he's able to play around Sucker Punch well and KO King Gambit, and the Hisuian Quillfish is also doing pretty well at providing some speed control through Icy Wind. But I mean, Jay
that
just
was kind
has
of
the
all it
Pokemon
was doing
advantage.
though.
Yeah, Jay has the Pokemon advantage, and Robbie isn't able to mount any real kind of comeback. And Jay's able to end up taking it. Like Robbie puts on a decent effort, a good show, but
Yep,
it just wasn't enough.
yeah, the comeback was almost real.
Hmm.
But
And then Meowscarada came in.
yeah, there was just such a Pokemon deficit.
Yeah, there was just another Pokemon. Like it felt like Jay was down to their last after, they had a KO come down. But then it was like, oh no, I'm not down to my last. I actually got two left. Yeah.
Yeah, it just came down to the Pokemon deficit really. Um, and then game two, we see something interesting from Robbie. They don't say good luck, have fun in chat. They only say good luck, and the game goes cursed right from the start.
What was that?
Right from the start, Robbie does not say good luck, have fun in chat. They only say good luck. They only say good luck, and the game is just
Hey, you
cursed.
better not be fucking having fun. But yeah, going into game two, we actually did see something pretty interesting from Robbie as Covert Cloak Inteleon just snipe shots the Salazzle for an Oko. But at the same
Which would have
time,
been
King Gambit
great.
Oko's Ceruledge, who didn't Terra.
Yeah, unfortunately,
You got a good KO, you got a good kill, but the
yep.
big threat is still on the field.
And new threats just keep coming in. Robbie basically lost in 4 turns, which is
Hmm.
almost impressive, I would say.
Yeah, like genuinely, like this game went so fast. Like,
It was just
I'm
KOs
just gonna
after
read through.
KOs.
I'm just gonna read through my notes, right? Like Covert Cloak Inteleon snipe shots to Oko Salazzle, King Gambit just Oko's Ceruledge. Vivillon Oko's Meowscarada as King Gambit gets a Swords Dance. King Gambit reveals safety goggles to be able to sucker punch Inteleon through Rage Powder. Bax KOs the Vivillon. King Gambit leaves Magnezone at 3%. And I mean, like, just God, this game just went so fast. But the big thing to note is that Robbie, while he was doing a great job at stopping everything else on the team didn't actually have a great way to stop the King Gambit.
Yeah, King
Like,
Gambit played huge.
yeah, like going back to this turn progression, right? You KO the Salazzle, you KO the Meowscarada. That's good and all. What about the King Gambit that's there and has a sword stance up?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not quite
It was
a
a super
pretty
fast
sight.
paced match. Like this was a genuine blitz. But in the end, Jay ends up being crowned the victory, which does drop Robbie down to being 3-3.
Which going into this league, Robbie we called one of the scariest players, and then
Mhm.
Robbie just they of course had very scary early season,
Yeah, I
but
mean
they
that's very true. Like that's the thing with Swiss is that generally the better your win rate, the tougher your opponents are going to be. But Robbie also just got unlucky with a lot of their matchups. Like a very early matchup into 9 put them into a place where they realistically should have had a better record, but just got like one of the worst matchups possible.
yeah.
And yeah, it's not like this is unheard of Robbie. Like Robbie's considered to be a very good player, but correct me if I'm wrong. They're not the type to just like 6-0 sweep. They're more the type to like get into playoffs and slot like sit 5 or 6, and then just win playoffs despite that.
Yeah,
And as
they're
was said, 3-3, that's still a playoff slot. Robbie is not out of this race yet. It's very possible that happens.
they're not out, but I do think that they their odds are kind of lower than what you would expect from Robbie, to be honest. They
It's true, but I
you
mean,
said they do
we've
come
also seen
in
previous seasons. We've seen previous seasons where they've done very similar things, like a very old season, back when the draft league had a different name actually, which I will not repeat. If I recall correctly, they actually had a very poor start to the season, but then ended up just completely clutching it in the back half and winning playoffs and just like sweeping that despite the poor start. And I'm not going to say the same thing can happen here since we're already in the back half, but it's possible Robbie still manages to eke by into playoffs and just wins through that. You can never really count him out at this point.
Yeah, that's true. You basically can't count them out, but
Hmm. And that's the thing about Robbie. You can never count this man out.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
going into our next game, however,
Hmm.
um, we have one of my favorite players. We have the Golden Gummies versus Hyrule's Herdiers,
Yep. Coaches being Ian and Link respectively.
with Link bringing Fletchinder, Gardevoir, Regieleki, Regidrago, Umbreon, and Mimikyu.
Yep. On the other hand, we do have Ian with the Electros, Tinkaton, Amoonguss, Arcanine, Galarian Articuno, and Iron Thorns.
Link is already off to a great start, not bringing Steve Jobs.
Yeah. I suppose Kemmel had to bear that burden today.
And Link, this set actually goes really well for Link.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, like right off the bat, right? Like Tailwind goes up and they just fire off a Dragon Energy. This does fail to pick up either KO thanks to a Terra Fairy from Iron Thorns, but at the very least, the Regidraco also went for Terra Steel, so it took barely any damage from the Thorns' Fairy Terra Blast. So it was still pretty decent all around.
and then we see Link put focus on other Pokemon than the Regidrago this set.
Mm-hmm.
They
Very
switch
true.
out Regidrago, and it's really good because the Gardevoir is helpful in the end game. Um, but focusing on the other Pokemon just lets Link save the Regidrago, which it doesn't end up using a Dragon Energy throughout the rest of the set, but it gets off a very crucial Draco Meteor, which is very powerful coming off of Regidrago. We cannot lie about that.
Yeah.
But it leaves
Mm-hmm.
the Psychic type Gardevoir versus the Poison type Amoonguss very easy two shot.
Mm-hmm. True. Yeah, I mean, in general, honestly, a Pokemon I want to put some highlight on here, put some spotlight on, is the Fletchinder. Actually, like
True,
right off the bat,
yeah.
it gets up Tailwind, it burns Thorns, it puts in work as it KOs both the Galarian Articuno and the Iron Thorns before dying. All of this while it was at 1%. And yeah, as was mentioned from there, Link was able to just clean up the game as Ian had no real way to slow down the offense. And I mean, game two wasn't too different, all things considered. Like Link gets a really good turn one, protecting against a double up. Uh, Admittedly, Ian goes for a pretty good Terra, putting Galarian Articuno into the grass type to try and resist, Alecki Thunderbolt, as it does 70% of the Alecki with the Freezing Glare. A Wisp miss from Link hurts, but it doesn't really matter as Galarian Articuno and Electros just get deleted by Regidrago's Dragon Energy.
But think about what turn the Regidrago comes in. Link takes their
Hmm.
time with this game, getting
Yeah,
like
it's
a
nice. It's something
real
that we definitely that I appreciate seeing. Using it more as a cleaner as opposed to just something to try and punch a hole in it at the start of the game.
Yep, Link really took their time with this game, getting into a really good position where the Regidrago could do what it needed to.
Hmm.
It's
True.
and on the side on the Regidrago's partner, the Mimikyu, got off a sword stance for almost free because of the Regidrago being the premier threat. And
Hmm.
it does die the next turn, but it takes a huge chunk off of Iron Thorns, and it just lets the Regidrago and Regieleki clean up because
Yeah, I mean,
I think this
this
was
type of play is something we only really see in like the back half of most leagues when the players have become really comfortable with their rosters and are now a lot more proficient in them, and it's something that you really enjoy seeing.
I think this was Link's best set yet. We have
In
seen
terms
Link
of play, I'd argue that might be true. They played really, really well overall. Like it was a solid, clean 2-0 victory, all things considered.
we've seen Link take wins before, obviously, but this game,
Hmm.
like we've been talking so much about Regidrago, and Link has been making it the focus of their team every time. How like if Regidrago goes down, the team falls apart. This set was perfect from Link, almost making it so that the Regidrago was not exclusively the spotlight, but taking their time with getting into position, getting maybe some chip down onto the board,
Hmm.
focusing on
Just
other
being willing to
Pokemon.
slow down in general. Sometimes you got to let the foot off the gas to get a little bit better of mileage. And
Yep,
that was something we clearly saw here. Really solid play from Link overall. But with that, I do think we should head into our next match.
yep.
That, of
We
course, being the hardened Metapods, coached by Sour, versus the New Zealand Zekroms, coached by Jaggy.
with
Uh,
Jaggy bringing Fluttermane,
mhm.
Pomot, Gothitelle, Magneton, Luminion, and Brute Bonnet.
Yep, on Sour side, we do have the Urshifu, Dondozo Tatsugiri, Mischievous, Flamigo, and Sneasel.
And
And so, game one,
right away, we
I mean,
see Terra
immediately we see.
Poison Urshifu.
I mean, it works. It works really well. It's able to resist the Fluttermane's Moonblast as it just nails it with a Wicked Blow for the Oko. And I mean, it's also able to hit Brute Bonnet for tons of damage because I
With
mean, the Brute Bonnet went into Terra Fairy, so it wouldn't be able to get fighting moves. So the Terra Poison, it's able to do really good damage thanks to that.
with the Terra Poison comes a very, very powerful Poison Jab.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
while it didn't KO the Brute on it, it took so much
Yeah, it
damage.
took a ton of damage. And I mean, it's not like Brute Bonnet was able to do a lot afterwards because I mean, Commander Dondozo Tatsugiri comes out and the Dozo shows safety goggles. I mean, really, this game just felt like it was insurmountable. Jaggy just was not able to break through the Dozo thanks to this, and a very dominant win went to Sour.
Yep, we do see last week it went a little bad. This week we do see without any way to like drop the attack or slow it down with like yawns.
Hmm.
The Dundozo, as it was in competitive as well, is just so scary. Running safety
It
goggles,
is,
it
yes.
basically stopped the only way to stop it.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
mean, speaking of ways to stop it, let's not. Let's talk about ways to make it even more terrifying as we go into game two, as the lead is Mischievous Tatsugiri, and Mischievous sets up Bear's Song. We're seeing Sour try to go for the co-star commander shenanigans.
and the worst part is, it works.
Yeah, like Sour goes for it. They switch Dozo. Admittedly, they switch it into a Terra Electric Palmot Double Shock. It only does 49%, but still, it's scary. But yes, the Dozo protects, the Tatsugiri faints, and Co-Star procs as it does. And from there, I mean, Flamigo and Dozo just wreck what is left of Jaggy's team.
If
I
you
do
see
want
a
to call attention. One thing I do want to call attention to from Jaggy's side, Psych Up Gothitelle, which it
It
didn't
was really cool.
accomplish much. but it was cool to see. It's a fun tech that we saw to try and counteract the Dozo. Still, seeing Flamigo Commander actually work is hilarious.
Yeah, when you see a double omni boosted opponent,
Yeah,
you don't think you're
it's
winning
still
that.
something. Yeah, and I mean it's really as simple as that. Just everything went perfectly that game for Sour, and so I see not much reason to dwell on it. And I say
There's
we might as
nothing
well
much
go
to
to the next
dwell.
bet.
There's nothing
Yeah,
well
there's
to
not much to dwell on. Exactly. Yeah.
Tatsugiri Dondozo just ate everything up. Flamigo just
hmm
cleaned up right after game two. There
Yep.
was basically nothing Jaggy could. Game one, I do want to call out game one actually a little bit more. The turns
Sure.
just went um to dwell on this a little more, get a little content.
Uh
Um
huh. We
the
got 13 matches to go through.
yeah, Jaggy, it basically goes just wrong for him. The Terra going onto essentially the wrong Pokemon. If the Terra went onto um if it was Terra Fairy maybe on the Fluttermane, it might have survived the Wicked Blow, maybe not getting the KO back, but it wasn't a sash. I don't think we saw what item it was. So it just, the turn one just went so wrong. And losing Fluttermane turn one is horrible. And then your Brute Bonnet, which is basically your only other stop, gets like chunked so hard right away turn two. So game one, Jaggy just everything goes wrong because of the Terra reads. Sour's Terra Poison goes off so perfectly.
Absolutely. But I mean, with all that said, again, great play from Sour. Solid, clean, quick 2-0 victory. And I say we might as well just shoot for the next one,
Yep, we
which would
have.
be the Shanghai Shedinjas, coached by Ninja, versus the Bellabug Basculins, coached by Olive. Olive bringing the Rotom Heat, Urshifu, Arboliva, Gengar, Murkrow, and Venomoth.
I think you talked about a certain Pokemon in there. Does she
Ugh.
bring Urshifu's on the team?
Yeah. There's no reason to mock it. She's
Yeah,
she's left it behind in previous weeks, but for very good and reasonable reasons.
yeah. Ninja bringing
Really, it's nothing more than a tease than anything else.
It really is. Uh, Ninja bringing Rillaboom, Arcanine, Greninja, which is a pretty good AFK or Firewater Grasscore. Not gonna lie, actually.
True.
Electric, Tinkaton, and Gallade rounding it out.
hmm
And what do you
Yeah, I mean,
think
I mean,
about?
getting into it, like game one, Olive gets a solid turn one, right? She protects Gengar from danger as Murkrow is able to get off a Tailwind thanks to Covert Cloak. The Greninja Terra rocks to resist the Psychic Extra Sentry, or sorry, not the Greninja, the Gengar Terra rocks, so that it doesn't have to deal with the super effective damage coming from the Psychic type Extra Sensory from the Greninja. However, it does just die to knock off and Water Shuriken before the Greninja itself dies. So the Terra does go down with the Gengar, unfortunately. Urshifu did come, and it was able to just delete the Arcanine, but it gets paralyzed in the process. Murkrow isn't able to set Tailwind back up, and I mean, Tinkaton and Rillaboom are able to just get rid of all its remaining two, giving Ninja the win. Like it was back and forth at the start, right? Like both sides were vying for position. However, once that Terra was consumed and the Gengar was dead, I mean, we've seen Olive put a lot of emphasis on that Gengar. It's been pretty much like the centerpiece of her team. So seeing it go down early, and again take the Terra with it, it didn't bode well.
Yeah, Greninja running Water Shuriken was huge in denying the Gengar, even if it didn't Terra
Yes.
Rock.
Yeah, even if it didn't Terra Rock, yeah, just
But
that solid fast move. Yeah,
and there were it like Gengar is basically Olive's S tier Pokemon. It's just relied
pretty
on
much.
so heavily, and
That thing has been carrying this team. Yeah.
there were some pretty good turns. Like you did call out the Urshifu KOing Arcanine, but Ninja not only had speed control but higher damage. But not only that, um, he did not let Olive have turns with their Pokemon, running a number of uh priority moves with extreme speed and water shuriken, thunder wave on
Yep.
Tinkaton. Olive just didn't really get a chance to play with her Pokemon.
hmm
um
Yeah, but I mean,
Speed
with that
control,
said,
it's just Ninja
mhm,
played to a very well like controlled out
I agree.
where Olive
Ninja
couldn't
played
do
really well
anything.
here. Mhm. But with that said, there is still a game two to go
There
over.
is a game two.
And I mean, to be fair to Olive, she does try and switch it up, right? She leads Arboliva and Venomoth before switching the Arboliva into Urshifu, which, I mean, it allows it to just eat an Ice Beam from Greninja before the Greninja is put to sleep by Venomoth. So, like, obviously, this adaptation already is being pretty good. It's being pretty solid, right?
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, the Arcanine does get Venomoth down to Sash. Luckily, the Arcanine switching out the next turn instead of just E-speeding seems to pretty much confirm Choice Band. It's also possible Ninja just wanted to preserve the Arcanine for the end game, though, because, I mean, it's good, okay? It's really good into Olive's team, all things considered. With the exception of Urshifu, not a lot threatens it super heavily.
Yeah, this game was really well played by both sides, but it was just
Mhm.
super well played by Ninja. They switched in, they switched out. Um, Arboliva was the definite substitute. Leech Seed just try to stall everything
Yeah.
out and try to heal everything
Yeah,
back
it
up.
tries to get up a sub,
But
Rillaboom, Terra, Tinkaton, and Rillaboom were able to break the sub and do some stuff, but yeah.
yeah, it just everything gets chipped down until the Urshifu getting KO'd basically sealed the game. It was Terra Ghost Urshifu, which
Yes.
it had a
I think it's
good
solid. I think it's a pretty good choice, all things considered.
yep.
It matches up
However,
really well into Rillaboom at that point, thanks to it being, immune to that fake out and being able to just do good damage while also shedding its grass weakness.
unfortunately, Rillaboom was also running knockoff.
Yeah, didn't work out for that instance.
Yeah, the
Regardless
Rillaboom
though,
did tear away from grass, which did let it be a leech seed target. I believe it did
mhm.
miss some leech seeds throughout this game. To be fair,
Yeah, a Leech Seed did get missed, which definitely hurt. But I think the big thing that really messed up Olive here was that her positioning wasn't able to be everything she wanted it to be, not of her own fault, but actually from the Tinkaton with red card.
yeah, the red card was
It took
such
it took some damage. It forced Urshifu out, and I mean, that's the same turn that Arboliva misses its Leech Seed, which put Olive on the defensive back foot. Like she's out of position, she's unable to capitalize anything. She tries to bring back Gengar, but by that point it's just too late. Ninja's able to use the Pokemon advantage to pivot around and just stop any play Olive tries to make. Again, Olive she plays well. She makes a good last stand, but the disadvantage is just too much to overcome. And Ninja was just pivoting around too well for her to land any meaningful hits. She just wasn't able to catch him.
and this is along with I believe is trying to catch leech seeds out.
It's
Tinkaton
what?
gets what's up?
No, sorry. What do you say? You cut out
Oh,
on my end.
the Tinkaton was spreading thunder waves while the Arboliva
Right.
was trying to spread leech seeds. So it was another ninja just got speed control out when came down to Urshifu being on the field. It just got taken out before it could do anything by the Rillaboom's knockoff. So it was just
Hmm.
too slow to be able to attack, leaving no answer. Arcanine was definitely preserved. It just launched some flare blitzes into Arboliva first to break the sub, and then 100% damage dealt, just one shots it. So preserving
Yeah.
the Arcanine was huge, but also spreading the thunder waves. Like Ninja played, Olive played great, pretty great for what she was trying to do. Arboliva stall is definitely something that you can do. It's definitely interesting to do, but
Hmm.
Ninja just played around how passive Olive was trying to play.
Yeah, I mean, for a team as offensive and aggressive as the Bellabog Basculins, it feels like she's sort of tried to lean back on the Arboliva a bit too much to be that defensive backbone, which, while it can win some games, in an end game, thanks to Leaf Seed and such, it's not that kind of like super bulky Pokemon that you can rely on for that role consistently. And I feel like that sort of like that that Pokemon playing out of roles, it's pretty similar to something we kind of see with Valorant actually. It's just the Pokemon isn't able to do everything it wants to for that reason.
Olive does, of course, pick her Pokemon a little more, I won't say carefully, but The team was
Right,
built
I'm not gonna say
pretty
that it's
well.
bad. It's solid. It's a
Yeah,
good
the
team.
team was
It's
built
just
very
they
well.
haven't been able to be played to their fullest potential.
Yeah. Part of it was, again, Ninja just not letting her
Yeah, Ninja
play,
also just played very well. Yeah, I don't want to discount that at all. Ninja
and
played really, really well.
especially game 1, just Ninja did not let her play with how she wanted to play.
Yeah.
And
But with that said,
I do wanna say
hmm,
game 1 might have knowing Olive a little bit as a player, game 1 might have tilted her a little bit, actually,
possible, yeah.
because we do see a couple plays, like, I won't say they're questionable. Ninja definitely just has better turn
Yeah,
the red
I
card.
think yeah, I think most of the turns Olives makes that don't end up panning out well aren't necessarily bad turns. It's just Ninja does a really good job of capitalizing the advantage he has. And when you're that far behind, any turn is going to look like a bad turn usually. Because if you're not actively like swinging the entire game in your favor, then you're losing.
Yeah.
You know?
But losing that slowly, like, you could have if Olive was able to get rid of the Arcanine, it would Arbaliva may have had a chance. A
Sure,
lower chance, but Leech Seed substitute, I've played with Celesteela
it's a chance
before, it's
nonetheless. Yeah.
definitely,
Mhm.
um
But yes, with all that said, Ninja
yeah,
does take the 2-0 victory, and that brings us to the last match of the night. That being the Wishing Well Washing Machines, coached by Jake, versus the Athens Victinis, coached by Costa.
with Costa bringing Azumarill, Annihilate, Vivian, Morgrim, Colossal, and Salamence.
Yep, on Jake's side, we do have the Tornadus Therian, the Basculegion, Dreadnought, Gudra, Raichu, and Spupa. And right away, we see Costa go for a really cool play. The Colossal tears into grass, and it gets aqua jetted by the Azumarill, which of
Hang
course
on,
activates Steam Engine,
that was game 2,
but it also
actually.
activates. Hmm?
This is game 2, actually.
No, that's game one.
In the submissions, they submitted games
Did
1
they
and
submit
2.
them in the wrong order?
Yeah, it was edited.
Uh,
The game was,
well,
th
all right. Disregard that. That's spoiler then. So, game one. I mean, I suppose this makes more sense for it to be a game one then, because I mean, immediately Jake commits an early Terra as Costa just uses double protect to scout. They bring in Mens to try and intimidate Dreadnought, which I mean, thanks to a citrus berry and the intimidate, Azumarill actually has barely enough HP to tank a rock slide and bleak wind and still have enough health left to belly drum. Like at this
unfortunate
point, Costa's team is weakened, but he has a bullet loaded.
unfortunately, that bullet is still prone to fake outs from the
Yeah,
Raichu.
the bullet does misfire. Costa stumbles a bit. They protect the Azumarill instead of just attacking with it, and because of that, Raichu gets a free switch in, and it's able to just fake out Azu the next turn, as you know, the double protect fails. Had he just fired off an attack, he probably would have deleted anything, but the belly drum rain boosted Azumarill, while terrifying, it's not invincible,
You
especially
gotta
when it was
play
at
around.
such low health. Yeah. And from there, Costa just lost a lot of his offensive presence, and with the rest of his team so battered, he had no real recourse. It was solid play from Jake, and congrats on the win for there. But that does bring us to game two.
With the pretty cool turn of
Yeah,
the
the pretty cool
Colossal.
turn of the Colossal tearing into grass, getting aqua jetted to activate Steam Engine, and instead of a weakness policy, it teared into grass, and it had Absorb Bulb activate. And the Terra Blast, the Terra Grass Terra Blast, just deletes Dreadnought.
Unfortunately, Terragrass is weak to Bleakwind Storm, so the Colossal does
Yeah.
take it doesn't get one shot, but it does take a massive amount of damage.
Yeah, I mean, the fake out the following turn allows Bleak Windstorm to connect for massive damage as Jake gets the double knockout. Like notably, we saw Colossal go with another Terra Blast into the Raichu,
It does
which
chunk
I
it.
mean, it does chunk it, but the thing is, it
It
does
doesn't
that when
KO it.
Tornadus is still on the field. So it makes me think it doesn't have a rock move, which is a questionable choice going into the twin player. Now, granted, if you're a special colossal set, your options for rock moves aren't great. Usually it's
No.
like ancient
Ancient
power
Power.
at best, but it's still better than nothing, right? Like I'm not going to claim to know the calc off the top of my head, but I feel like that would have done pretty decent damage, potentially even killed if it was a not as bulky torn.
Which I don't want to say most Tornadoes are at least max HP. So
Oh, sure. Again, I mean, Colossal's strong, but it's also a weak move. I'm not going to claim to know the calc off the top of my head. It's just odd to not see a rock move get brought. Does it
Yeah.
even get Power Gem? I don't recall that off the top of my
No,
head. I'm
it
going to
was
check.
Ancient Power, I'm pretty sure.
It is Ancient Power? Okay.
Because I remember people trying to run special
Nope,
Colossal.
it has Power Gem.
Oh, it
It
does
has
have Power
Power
Gem?
Gem. It does have Power Gem now, yes. I
Okay.
believe it didn't back in Gen 8, but it does now.
Okay. My bad then. I never
Hmm
checked up on it then. But
Regardless, yeah. I mean, by that point, the Vivillon and the Ments try to do something, but Jake is able to bring both of them to beneath 20% as Basculegion just cleans up the game. You dealt with one of the terrifying rain sweepers in Dreadnought. Basculegion was still there, though.
yeah, with no
Yeah.
real way to reset the weather, you know you're going to be playing in rain. Jake having
hmm
at least two rain abusers, Swift Swim, and then you have Raichu that can run Thunder. You have Tornadus, whose Bleak Wind Storms become accurate. It's just you either have to reset the weather or play so carefully.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
well,
much. And I mean, things like the Terra Grass on the Colossal, they worked out well in theory, right? Like you're
yeah,
able to take
in
down
theory
the
they're
Rain of
great.
Abusers. Yeah, you take out the Rain of Abusers comfortably, but the Torn is still there. He's the Rain Setter, and he's threatening you really heavily if you Terra Grass.
If there was
Honestly, a part of me wonder. I'm not going to claim to know the calc. It's possible Terra Grass was needed to confirm the KO on the Dreadnought, but maybe Terra Electric again may have actually been the better play. Who knows? It's hard to say.
that's still very scary because of the Raichu.
I know it is scary because of Raichu. I agree. It's not perfect. Like both sides run some risk. One side you're being threatened by Tornadus. The other side you're risking Raichu being able to shut you down. Neither side is perfect. They both have their ups and downs. But I mean, Terragrass is what we've seen really consistently. Maybe mixing it up would have done something. Is all I'm saying.
Maybe Azumarill didn't take
Maybe
a lot of damage. It might have been able to go for like turn two Belly Drum just to help
it's possible. Yeah.
because the
Yeah. Yeah. If they
Colossal
didn't
did
commit with the Colossal, if they just had the Azumarill do Azumarill shit, it could have worked out pretty well as well. Yeah.
because it survived the Bleakwind Storm
hmm
the first time. So if you
Yeah.
could have protected it, gone for Belly Drum on Azumarill, go for like Aqua Jet into Tornadus, hope it's not Focus Sash, you can get like the free hit into Raichu, and even if it hits back, you still have a ton of HP to work with.
Yeah.
So it might have just been, I don't want to say a misplay. They did go for Aqua Jet, which
hmm
did almost 50% of Raichu's health. Rain, of course, was up, so maybe that's what they were focusing on.
Yeah.
But your Colossal's all set up. There, that's a big focus. Azumarill was still at full HP. You just
Yeah.
go for a Belly Drum.
Very true.
How much did Bleakwind Storm do to it? Bleakwind
I don't recall
Storm,
off the top of my head, but I mean,
42.
hey, sure,
So
42. So yeah, it would have been an option had it because the Dreadnought died, so it didn't really matter.
yeah,
It was being threatened, but hey, who knows? Sometimes you got to make those big risky plays. Sometimes you got to just click Swords Dance in front of two aggressive Pokemon, hoping that they're going to double protect.
which we've seen work. We've seen it fail, but we've seen it work.
uh, yeah,
The Colossal
but
is, of
yeah.
course, the
With
big
all that
threat right
said,
there anyway.
yeah. With all
But
that said, Jake does take the win. Which, again, Jake was a Pokemon, not a Pokemon, a player that wasn't super notable in the early weeks. Like they were doing pretty well, they were doing solid.
I think they were
However, by
about
this
half
point
and
in
half
time,
early on.
yeah, they were about half and half, but they've really pulled ahead now. At this point, they're 4-2 and are in a prime playoff position. Like they've really like snuck under the radar a lot of this league, but now they're really starting to like make it known that they're a damn solid player. And I look forward to seeing what they're going to be doing in future weeks.
Yep, they have definitely. They still make a couple questionable plays, maybe a couple like
Yeah, I'm not
super
going to say they're
aggressive
perfect plays,
Gudra
but they're
plays.
still pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, we didn't see Gudra at all this week, which I'd say was a plus.
Uh, did we even see a fourth Pokemon in game two though?
I'm not even confident we did.
Yes, we did. It was
We did? All right, sure,
Tornadus,
sure.
Basculegion, Dreadnought, and Raichu.
Right, right. But
But
regardless, that is all the matches for tonight. And so I think we may as well wrap it up here. Anything else
yep.
you want to add before we head out?
I think I pretty much covered everything in the episode.
Awesome. I mean, going into next week, we are going to week 7, which second to last week of the main season. We're nearly at playoffs at this point. It's exciting.
I think to be in most leagues I've ever been in, VGC, draft, anything, the week 2 weeks before playoffs has always been the most exciting for some reason.
I mean, hey, it's fun because it's that like not quite at the finish line, but like the finish line is in sight and
It
people's are just laser focused.
it's the game where people who might have a chance really claw for that. Like
Hmm.
the last week, that's your desperation players, but this is the week where if you have a chance, you go for it.
Exactly.
And I'm looking forward to seeing that come out in the next week.
I'm as well. And I suppose we will see everyone then.
Yep. Good luck. Have fun to everybody in the league. Have a good week.
Hmm.